Hello, and welcome back to this Phantasy Star 4 playthrough. Wherein wanted to help Chaz deal with his very serious problem of motivation. And I guess it's somewhere in the Esper Mansion, so we're going to go over there and see what happens. Now, I kind of forgot the layout of the Esper Mansion, so it's going to take me a minute to get to where I'm going. So while that's happening, I'd like to talk about a little something with game titles. Now, I may have... In fact, I definitely did mention that Phantasy Star 2 was called something like The End of the Days That Will Never Return. What it was not called was Phantasy Star 2. And if you took a look at the title screen, you'll notice that Phantasy Star 4 is also not Phantasy Star 4, it's the end of the millennium. Now, the box art says differently, at least the Western version, but the Japanese version does not. Phantasy Star 3 was called Phantasy Star 3, which is as if we didn't need an... Okay. Just in case we need more reasons to set that game aside, well, there's another one. There's some interesting discussions on whether it should be considered really part of the series. I'm inclined to say yes because it got a pretty specific mention in Phantasy Star 4, and Phantasy Star 4 is definitely part of it. Plus, we have Wherein, and... if there was not a Phantasy Star 3 as we know it, we would not have Wherein, and I like that character enough that I'm willing to keep everything despite all the messiness of that third game. Well... well, he is 16... this isn't really spelled out, but I get the impression that this is the sword used at the end of the game by the main characters of Phantasy Star 1 and 2, even though it was given more generic names in those games. Like, it was just the Laconian sword in Phantasy Star 1 and the Nay sword in Phantasy Star 2. I think the evidence is stronger in 2 because the sword had some special properties in that game. Also, I had forgotten that this cave was a thing, so when I recorded this video I was a little surprised and concerned about random encounters, but there aren't any. Well, Chaz is about to meet the other characters. Sort of. This scene here, of all the people and a couple of critical moments in previous Phantasy Star games, is a good example of an integral strength and weakness of Phantasy Star 4. The earlier games serve as a foundation of this one, the foundation, and just about everything that happens can be traced to some part of its history. If you experience that history by playing those games, every connection will carry its meaning to you very clearly. If not, a lot of it might seem bland or unexplained or just fall flat. And someone playing the game in that context, I would not blame them for not thinking the story is especially good. Well, to be fair, I think it's I won't get super angry at someone who played the previous games and didn't like the story of this one as much. That's just personal taste. My own journey through this series was a strange one. I played Phantasy Star 3, then 4, then 1 and 2. So my first experience with this game was not really the intended one. And since those early games were so niche, I don't think a lot of other people got that experience either. And now, here I am perpetuating it by playing this... by skipping right to the last game in the series on this channel. I think I should apologize for that one. I just wanted to get this started before Phantasy Star Online 2 came out, and I didn't think things through, so... I might have made the experience worse for my viewers by doing this instead of just playing the whole series in order, so I'm sorry. I might have made a serious mistake there. Well, going back to this game, what's happening here, which is the way to the final confrontation, kind of brings up another question, which is how much has our actions changed things during the course of this story? Like, is the only thing that they've done is essentially train themselves up enough so that they can actually handle the final confrontation at the end? Like, is the product of all of that just a party that can possibly save Algo? I mean, that you could argue that that's very significant, but I'd like to think that there's more of a point to our actions than that. So I'm gonna be charitable and say that it's possible that fighting off those dark forces and their attempts to destroy a whole lot more of Algo maybe the reason why we're able to fight the profound darkness on the other side instead of it stepping out into Algo, because I think that would cause a whole lot more damage. That's purely my own theory or hypothesis, though. There's nowhere near enough proof to call that a theory. Well, we've got everyone, but before we elaborate on this situation anymore, I do appreciate the game giving us a reasonable excuse for keeping the party size to 5. And the reason I appreciate it is it's something that was sort of established over the last dungeon or two instead of just sprung on us. It's sort of a logical conclusion about what's happening. But before all that, we have that tower. The angry tower that was angry at us and didn't want us to go. But now we can go. I kind of forgot the trigger that allowed you to go in, and looking at what that trigger is now, I feel a little bit silly. I know. More of those kind of same-looking crystal towers in Rykros where there's no one to really talk to, and... oh well. Actually, this tower has a little bit more to it than the others, which is a fairly interesting choice considering that it's the only optional one. Not because of the dungeon design or anything, though. And that's why you can go in. The main thing of interest here is that there are a couple of treasure chests that are very good to pick up. Saldu is, of course, the best item for getting out of an extremely bad situation, because there is no Life 2 spell. If you want to recover someone from dying with full health, that's the only way to do it. The tower itself is simpler than the others, and the encounters are nothing we haven't seen before. I get the impression that it's just designed so that you can grab the treasure and move on pretty fast. And that's our second set of guard mail, so we don't have to choose who is going to get the viable amount of defense for the final dungeon. I kind of like the idea of the story kind of walking you through getting most of the gear, but if you want enough to fully gear everyone in that stuff, you have to go out of your way a bit. Another reason that there's not a whole lot to worry about is... Oh, by the way, we have the Alcidian now, and Chaz is automatically equipped with it. It deals Chaz damage, and it can instantly kill dark units sometimes. Units? Enemies. This isn't a strategy game. So it's a final end of the game sword used by the main character. Of course, it's going to be amazing. And since we're going into a darkness dungeon, pretty much every enemy is going to be weak to it. And that mumble is really easy to miss. So is the one in the Alcidian cave. Oh. Yeah, if you just stand there and don't do anything else, we'll just keep attacking you. This is an actual fight. Though not a very difficult one. Chaz definitely did not think of her being an illusion. He's not quite that stable. Well, I don't really blame him, but people do not come back to life like that in this setting. Uh-oh. Well, that sounds like a bad guy technique if ever I've heard of it. So maybe we shouldn't jump at that thing. Say what? Yeah, this is one of those things where if you say you don't want it, then you get it. But if you say you want it, then there's trouble. In this case, the trouble is... Oh, you want Megid? I'll give you Megid, and you have to fight it and it just annihilates you. I guess that's what happens when one of the Guardians actually tries to kill you instead of just trying to test you. But we have Megid now. I'll use it probably once to show off the animation and then never use it again, because it's very expensive in technique points, and its damage is, well, it's a multi-target attack, so it's much better to just save it for Nathu on the boss or something, I think. Chaz technique points are still precious, and Megid uses a huge amount of them. And there are much more efficient ways for Chaz to deal with random encounters. So it's a nice thought. Megid has shown up in Phantasy Star 2, 3, and 4, although the mechanics of it are different each time. But if I'm actually concerned with winning the game, I'm not going to use it. Oh yeah, it's also part of an even more impractical combination attack, which I guess I should show off at some point. But now we have an interesting situation in front of us. We get to pick our party member, so let's take a look at all of them. Oh, you're training, are you? Considering what we've been doing, and that Han has caught up with us in strength, I'd love to see a side story about what kind of training he was doing. One of the jokes I've seen about Han is that he spent some time in the hyperbolic time chamber from Dragon Ball Z. That gear he's using is the best of its type in the game, so I guess part of his training was in super crafting, I guess. He did mention that he was helping his father with it, but not to this extent. He's also learned some skills and techniques that change how he works, mostly in the direction of killing things. Though he does also have the Res series, and thanks to his high mental stat, it's pretty strong. And hello, Grizz. I haven't seen you in the party for quite a while either. Maybe, maybe not. In fact, that almost seems like a joke. But stat-wise, Grizz has been out of our party for almost as long as Han, but he hasn't changed much. His strength is absurdly high, he hits hard, and now he's accurate enough that he doesn't really miss anymore. What he has that's unique is instant death that works best against wizards, and we will face some scary wizards in there. He's also learned Sweeping, which is an X version of Air Slash, so that gives him some crowd clearing ability, and it hits pretty hard because that's what Grizz does. By the way, when I say unique, I mean unique among the available characters. Demi is more or less unchanged. Like the rest of them, she has new gear. Her medic power is no longer one and done, but it's still an emergency measure rather than something you can use to maintain a party through a long dungeon. What can be used a lot more is Phonon Mazer. When combined with Air Slash, that can clear out a whole lot of encounters. She's not as good when it comes to boss killing though, and having two androids makes full party heals not work so well. Come on. I know you can get out of that menu past me. And welcome back, Kyra. Man, it wasn't that long ago that we left you behind on Desolis. Kyra is mostly the same, but the environment around her has changed a little. Metis is still an amazing endurance skill. There are no robots in the next dungeon, and very few monsters that she can't hurt with her techniques or slashers. So she's still versatile and helpful in a lot of situations, just in the same way as before. She's also learned Tandle, although only one use of it. And that's not very impressive. If she had more, then we'd be able to make better use of a combination that uses it. Still a good character, though. Oh, really? Man, I'd love to see a side event where you take Raja around to see everything on Motavia. Raja offers the same thing he used to. With him in the party, you never die. You never run out of technique points. And now he can help clear out encounters with Saint Fire and Holy Word. A substantial number of enemies we'll face can be killed by Holy Word. And clearing out 5 encounters just with the push of a button is still very useful, on top of all of the other support that he can provide. So who am I gonna bring? Well, I don't know. You tell me. Tell me who to bring in the comments. And if there's a split decision on that, I'll see if I can bring in someone else to make the decision for me, because I have a certain bias, and I think it'd be against the spirit of this idea to tell you that the choice is yours and then make the decision myself anyway. So let me know who you want me to bring along. See you then!